you doing, Met fans? We're back for another edition of the Terry Collins Show, presented by Tunnel to Tower, supporting America's greatest heroes. Donate just $11 per month by going to t2t.org. That's T2T.org. I'm John Arezzi. We have to start the show off today by thanking all of you who have streamed the Tunnel to Towers documentary, Never Forget How Baseball Helped Heal New York, on our YouTube channel, and watched all the promotional clips that our creative director, Marsh, put together from that film on our Facebook page, Instagram, and YouTube show pages and channel. Over 500,000 views and streams of those clips have been watched since Memorial Day, and over 10,000 of you have watched the film on our YouTube channel. Very impressive numbers, so we thank you all for that. But we do have a big show for you today. We're going to get right to our leadoff. We don't want to waste another minute. Today, Terry and I are pleased to bring on Laura Albanese and a very special guest joining us for that leadoff today, the one and only Howie Rose. Well, the Mets are back on the West Coast this week, their last West Coast swing of the season, facing the Mariners and San Diego Padres. So joining us on today's leadoff, we bring on Laura Albanese from Newsday and the radio voice of the New York Mets, Mr. Howie Rose. Good to see everybody.
Good to be here.
Good to see you too.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you guys on. It's there's a lot to discuss, and it's always enjoyable hearing your comments. So I appreciate you coming on the show.
Anytime, TC.
Always.
Well, basically, I wanted to get into this first. I mean, having both of you on together, and this is something that I've wanted to do for a while with Howie and Laura, because you guys both paint such an eloquent picture of the New York Mets. Laura in print, Howie, of course, the voice of the Mets. And I have to start off with saying that the way you both describe what you do to fans like myself who consume this every single day, it almost talks us off the ledge and gives us a realistic perspective of what's going on this year with the team. First question, and I'll get everybody's opinion here. Are you all so very surprised that this is the way this season is unfolding for the 2026 Mets when the expectations were so high going into the season?
Can I say ladies first without getting canceled?
Sure, of course. I can't say I'm not surprised, only because, I mean, if you read anything that I wrote from before the season, I was like, okay, this has the potential to have a really high ceiling. But I also remember saying that it has the potential to have a really low floor. And I do think we're seeing kind of a little bit of that floor right now, specifically because, again, David Stearns went after players with historically bad injury histories, and you can't be surprised when those players do get injured. And certainly there are players who have underperformed. And it's just, I think the lack of consistency is obviously a big issue. I mean, yesterday we saw with Mark Vientos with his errors and just what he's been doing at the plate. And we're seeing it with the pitching staff as well. I mean, at one point the rotation was doing pretty well, and then it kind of crumbled. The bullpen has been okay. But the offensive inconsistency in particular, I think maybe took some people by surprise, because at the beginning of the season, the one thing the Mets did have going for them was, I thought, a good amount of depth. And we're just not seeing that, mostly because of those injuries and a few players underperforming.
You know, I'm surprised because we couldn't have forecast the pieces that they envisioned being everyday pieces would go down at the volume that they have to this point. But now, when you see what's replaced them, look, Luis Robert may or may not come back at all, given the severity of his back problems, but I don't want to see them take A.J. Ewing out of center field at this point. I don't know where this season is going. Obviously, it's been a disappointment, but whatever it's going to turn out to be, I prefer they get there having the opportunity to watch Ewing develop every day, because he doesn't look overmatched. And what he does defensively, I don't know about you, Terry, but I watched that kid play center field. He reminds me a lot of Lenny Dykstra. And, Carson Benj is a kid that I think has answered a lot of early questions about how he would counter adjust to the inevitable adjustments. It's not just that he's been hot and cold, but when he's come through a cold spell, he's done it in profound fashion. And so as we sit here today, he's a couple of days removed, just from a 2 home run game, which I think is kind of the last piece of his offensive puzzle, because he's going to hit for power. And just to watch him and Ewing every day, that's a season saver for me, no matter where they wind up in the standings. But obviously, it's disappointing to see where they are right now.
Yeah, I agree with both what you're saying, and I try to watch as much as I can. I don't watch a lot of the West Coast games; they're just way too late for me. But it's nice to have young pieces. It really is. But this team is built to win. It's not built to showcase your young talent, and so it comes down to those veteran guys. The star player, obviously Soto's living up to what we expected, but the injuries to the other guys and the fact that before some of them got hurt, they were not producing. And I don't know what to make of it. I'm not in spring training. Howie, Laura, I used to, we were taught years ago that spring training was meant not just for day one, but it was meant to get you through a season. And I see so many early injuries now throughout baseball where, I don't know if the guys run enough. I don't know if they do enough on the fields during spring training, which was when, my God, for 50 years, guys came to spring training, to get in shape and to get ready for 6 months. And not just to be able to get out there day one. And, guys, it's now where there's so many leg injuries anymore, and we never had that. And so, remember when pitchers started to get hurt, everybody said, "What's the weights?" The pitchers are using too many weights, so it's hurting them. Well, maybe that's true. Well, the position players are getting big and strong now, but you know what? I don't think they run enough. It's the same thing. I go back, and I've said this to both you guys. I looked at Kodai Senga. When he was in Japan, this guy threw 200 pitches between starts. He threw 155, 160 pitches in the game, and we've tried to make him an American, where 75 pitches to 90 pitches is all he's asking. He's not ready to do that. I mean, I've talked to some people that say, oh, his sidelines are 45 pitches, which is what Americans do. Japanese don't do that. They throw 115 pitches because they want to make the game easy. When they go out there to a game, they want to make sure their 100 or 110 pitches is easy. And so due to the way the game is transformed to where they're trying to get him in shape today, I don't know anything about how much batting practice guys are taking now. I hear about, the cage work. We used to try to get guys 60 to 70 at-bats in spring training. Because when I looked it up, guys, in some of the big years they had, I checked out how many at-bats they had in spring training. 1 year when I was at Anaheim, Tim Salmon was one of the best players, easily one of the top 10 players in baseball, and he didn't have enough spring training at-bats. When we started getting him spring training at-bats, he got off to big starts. And so, they've all reverted to the experts who have never been on the field before to dictate how these guys get ready. And I think it's affected the way they've gotten off to some slow starts recently.
I feel like that does make a lot of sense. I mean, we hear it time and time again when it's interesting when a guy's hampered by injury during spring training and he doesn't get those reps, and suddenly he's not doing well during the season. Like, oh well, it's because he missed spring training. But then you're babying players throughout spring training, and they're not getting the at bats they needed. Maybe they're not getting the action they needed, and they get off those slow starts. And people are like, well, why could that possibly happen? So how can one thing be true and the other thing also not be true at the same time?
Yeah. Terry, do you know the answer to this? And I probably should, but I've never really asked or looked into it. But given what you just told us about the way and the number of pitches that pitchers in Japan throw between starts, do they have anywhere close to the percentage of arm injuries among their pitchers that we do here?
Well, they have injuries. I'm not saying they don't, but I go back to what guys when you started announcing. I mean, the Darlings and those guys, they threw a lot, man. That's what they did. They ran and they threw.
Yeah, when
Huh?
I started announcing, it was the Christy Mathewsons and the Walter Johnsons. Come on now, you're being too
Well, the same
kind.
thing. I mean, I used to, as you guys know, one of my best friends is Sandy Koufax. And you talk to Sandy Koufax about pitching, he pitched a game, he took a day off, he threw batting practice, he took a day off and pitched. He threw and ran, and that's what they did. And there wasn't they didn't limit to a certain number that the opposition dictated when you were going to take him out of a game. And so now we start trying to stretch guys out to get 90 pitches. Well, they should have been able to throw 90 pitches day one. I mean, that's what makes it. That's what makes the early season like it. You could used to be able to get 7 innings out of your starter when you opened up the season. Now, again, I understand it's all power now. It's hard as you go as hard as you can for as long as you can. I understand the theories, but when you sit here in an industry and question all the injuries involved, you better reevaluate how these happen and go back and look at the history books and say, how did those other guys survive? How do they throw 300 innings a year and not be hurt? Okay, maybe we need to back off some of the weights, or maybe back off some of the 102 mile an hour fastballs, and it's because for me, the game is still about the fans. And when your star players are hurt all the time, the fans are the ones who are suffering. Even the fans of the team itself. And so to be able to keep them on the field, there's got to be a reevaluation of how to get these guys ready.
Yeah, and I think one of the frustrating things, last year when I asked David Stearns, because they also dealt with a bunch of injuries last year, I asked David Stearns if they wanted to reevaluate the processes in terms of the way that they kind of like look at these guys, evaluate these guys, deal with their health. They're like, no, we're very happy with the things in place. Now, granted, this is what's being said to the media, so it could be completely different than what reality is. But I think if you're a fan hearing that and you're like, okay, a bunch of guys are getting hurt, but we're not going to reevaluate how we train these guys or how we take care of or how the medical staff approaches things, you're probably a little bit kind of disillusioned with the situation.
Yeah, and Laura, you're right. And I understand fatigue's an issue, right? I understand that. But you go back into any sport, especially the physical sports, track and field runners. If you run the 100-yard dash, you don't just train at 100 yards. You train at 220. You train at 440, to make the 100 yards easier. Okay, if your legs start to get a little tired, back it down. And it's the same thing. I used to tell of course, I had one of the best pitching coaches in baseball in Dan Worthen. Somebody would have a game where they might throw 122 pitches. And Dan would say, next game we'll back him down to 95. So we don't get him too fatigued to where there might be a problem. And then he goes to 95. Next game, he's ready to go 115 again. But, for me, because I read the papers every day and I look at these papers and I see, and my God, and the length of time it takes to get these guys back from leg injuries, it's incredible. I mean, and again, I'm not a doctor. But I will tell you, I had a lot of guys playing at 75% in the month of September. I can tell you that.
Yeah, things have certainly changed. I wanted to bring up a pitcher that you wrote about, Laura, in one of your recent columns, Sean Manaea, and he has worked very hard to try to come back and to get stretched out to be able to get back in the rotation. And your column basically said the Mets should put Manaea back into the starting rotation. So give us that evaluation, and I want to hear everyone's opinion, of course, on Sean Manaea, and should he be now brought back into the Mets starting rotation?
I mean, I don't necessarily know that the Mets have much of a choice considering what they're doing right now with these consistent openers and then having David Peterson. I mean, David Peterson obviously wants to start, but he has historically done better with the opener. And every time you use an opener, which I've done the past few games, it's going to absolutely limit your bullpen because you're going to have to use more and more guys. You have the bulk guy, and then you have a bunch of guys coming after him. So reinserting Sean Manaea into the rotation and stretching him out, because right now he's only stretched out to like 65-ish pitches, I think would be you have to at least give it a shot. We know his velocity was down, but his velocity was ticking up to 93, 94. I thought it was really interesting. He had added the cutter. He's throwing the sweeper harder and with more conviction, basically just like throwing it as hard as he can and kind of just seeing what happens and not trying to be too fine with it. And with that, with the addition of the sinker, I think it's kind of getting hitters a little bit off balance, particularly because he has that arm slot that's also really deceptive. So all these pieces together and the work that he's putting in, some of it's psychological too, where he just has a little bit more confidence in his stuff. I do think it's worth another look for him. I mean, he is trying to get back in there. They need a living, breathing human being who can throw every 5 days. And Sean Manaea could absolutely be it. I mean, will he be the Sean Manaea of 2024? Maybe, maybe not. But I just feel like it's better than the alternative.
I think right now, not only do I agree with Laura, but I'll take it sort of in a somewhat different direction. I think right now they have to move him into the rotation or at least utilize him for as long a period as he can hang on over the course of a game, if it means using an opener, because at the very least, you're riding the wave. He finally, and for the first time in a long time, really going back to 24 now, he is in a position where because he's getting better success with his sweeper in particular. And he talked about that after his most recent outing, that he thinks the sweeper now has been kind of the key to his recent renaissance. With the velocity up, with him feeling good about where the sweeper is, he finally has a little bit of a role that he's going on that I think you've got to exploit. And given the other inconsistencies, whether from Peterson or anywhere else in the rotation, I think you've got to plug Sean in there and ride him as hard and as far as you can right now, because he's proven that he can get the job done under the best of circumstances.
Well, and I agree with both of you. I think too. I've never been with this. There was a time when I was managing in New York where Steven Matz was getting off to slow starts, and it was brought to our attention one time that, and some of the guys who we used to do in the minor leagues, when guys were slow starters in the first inning, used to warm them up, set them down for 10 minutes, get them warmed up like they start the game, and then set them down for 5 or 6 minutes, and then get them up and get them so like they're going into the second inning. And there's ways to do it, but I just think Sean has earned it. I think what he's done, and I tell you what, you got to salute a guy who in the middle of a season changes his arm slot and makes himself a better pitcher. That is hard to do. And so I thought what he's done, what he's tried to accomplish, and I don't know Sean very well, but I'll tell you one thing, I like everything I read and hear about this guy, is that he's bound and determined to be as good as he can possibly be. And you know what? You got to reward some of those guys. But hey, look, you know what? You've earned this chance. Now go out there and get it. And you go to David Peterson, who's still growing into to be, a good big league pitcher, to say, look, watch, learn, and listen. Because down the road, you're going to be the guy. And there's a lot of we talked earlier about the young outfielders. Well, you got some young pitchers too that got to go through the same things. And David's shown that he could get outs here. So you know what? All he's got to do is continue to work and continue to watch and continue to grow as a pitcher or a position player.
And one other thing about David, and he probably won't like this, but history suggests that he can be very effective out of the bullpen in a variety of ways. Because remember in 24, when they went for that long postseason run, I mean, he was used a couple of times for an inning or two out of the bullpen and was extremely effective. And obviously this year, his best work has come, whether with an opener or later on in a game, when he's been used out of the pen. Now, again, it's his walk year, and that's not the profile that he's looking to build. But if you've got Manaea trending this way, where's my camera? This way. And, stinking iPad. I don't know where the hell the camera is, but, and then you look at where Manaea is going right now, as I mentioned before, ride that wave and take advantage of where Peterson has been most effective. Then maybe that's the combination that clicks to the Mets' best advantage.
Yeah, I mean, if you recall 2024 in the postseason, that's when he got his first save. I mean, this is the guy who came in and was able to lock it down. And the thing is, this pitching staff, because it's so interesting, they give you so many different looks. It does have a lot of potential. I mean, you got a situation where you have a lefty like Peterson, and then you have a lefty like Manaea, who looks completely different to batters. Then you have a guy who goes over the top like Jonah Tong. I mean, this could be really formidable just because it keeps hitters off balance. But one, everything needs to click, and two, people need to be put in positions to succeed.
Agree.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. I mean, it's easy to say, it's hard to do, as you guys all know, and I lived it. It's hard to you do what you think's best. You look at your options and you pick out the best options. But something's got to work for these guys. And I look up and I see some games where they pitch, but I'll tell you, we're going to get into it here in a minute. You better start putting some ball to some play and scoring some runs.
Seriously.
Absolutely. I want to talk about Marcus Semien because he has now shown this leadership by example. And in the beginning of the season, when the Mets acquired him in the trade for Nimmo, everyone was just saying he's an aging player, he's declining. And I think he really had something to prove to himself and to everybody else that has discounted his career. And he's really stepped up. And Laura, you wrote an excellent column about him, that he was bringing wisdom of age to the Mets to go along with the work ethic, which is leadership by example. So I'd like to get everybody's opinion on what you've seen with Marcus Semien, the way he's been producing recently, and the quiet leadership he may be bringing to the clubhouse.
Well, the one thing that I found interesting, just kind of looking at some of his numbers, is that he had historically struggled against off-speed pitches. And this year, he was hitting extremely well against off-speed pitches. I think he had like a 303 batting average and really poorly against everything else. And it was funny, I asked him about it, and he's like, sometimes hitting off-speed pitches really well means that you're missing the fastball. And so what he was looking at right now, it was shortening his swing and eliminating chase, and kind of just taking up kind of that sort of approach. And you've seen you've seen him produce more in these last couple of days, because his thing was, and these are his words, is that he needs to be able to catch up to velocity. And when he's catching up to velocity, that's when he's at his best. And so kind of adapting to that and working on that day after day after day, that's what's allowing him to catch up to more balls and maybe becoming more productive. And when I hear things like that, I do think that that's heartening, because that type of thing is repetitive. That's the type of thing that you can keep doing over the course of a season, as opposed to just getting really hot and being really streaky. He is actively working on changing his approach and kind of making those adjustments in a way that could be sustainable over the course of a season.
He's also talked about having to cut down his chase rate, because he has still shown pretty significant vulnerability down and away to off-speed stuff, even though he's hit other off-speed pitches that are more in the zone. I think when you look at where Semien is now, I don't think it's a whole lot different from maybe what we had a right to expect, given what the trends had been over the last 2 or 3 years. The question is, with 100 games to go, is there more in the tank? And it's been in flashes. And the encouraging thing is, he's been among the best, certainly on the ball club, and even one of the better ones in the National League, hitting with men in scoring position. And there aren't a whole lot of guys who can say that on this club right now. So, how much more room there is for him to advance beyond where he is now, I don't know. I know that right now he's kind of locked into what probably the modest expectations would have been before this season started, based on where he'd been the last year or so.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know him very well. I've obviously seen him play in other clubs, but Laura, you bring up, he said, "Hey, I'm not catching up to a fastball." Well, in today's game, that's hard because everybody throws so hard. But I go back to, and I watch it every night. When you see guys chase because they think they got to get the bat started early, because if they're hunting fastballs and they got to get the bat started and think they got to catch up to it, of course they're going to chase. Because now that's why for years guys threw off speed pitches. So what was the old theory, Howie, for 100 years? It was hit the fastball up the middle, keep yourself back and adjust to the off speed pitches. So and I see guys that are generally trying to pull the fastball, and so now all of a sudden those off speed pitches, those backdoor sweepers or whatever it's called, sliders, because they got to get that bat started because they're throwing 98 miles an hour. They're vulnerable to that off-speed pitch. If you think about it, and that's why I go back to look at some of those teams. I look at the Toronto Blue Jays last year. They were one of the best two-strike hitting teams in baseball because they worked the middle of the field. They weren't worried about hitting the ball over the fence. They're worried about putting the ball in play. And as we saw last night's game. Okay, there's a couple of errors were made, and I get that. That's part of the game. That's one of the things. But you put the ball in play, things happen. And so the less you strike out and the more that ball's active, a lot of things can take place. And, we used to call them productive outs. There's nothing wrong with once in a while, hitting the ball the other way and getting a runner to third base and letting the next guy drive him in. And, and again, they bring the infield in. Not every ball is going to get caught, or, it's going to have to be a good throw, especially if you get a good break off third base. There's things that happen, but, I still think some of the old things that we're taught about, hey, 2 strikes, let's work the middle of the field so that, we put the ball in play and move the ball around a little bit and hopefully score some runs.
Terry, let me ask you a question. There's kind of this like ongoing philosophy in hitting now that strikeouts are not a big deal. It's like, it's just another out. It doesn't really matter as much. I mean, do you buy into that? Is it?
No.
Okay.
No, not a bit. And again, Laura, I mean, look what's happened. Look at the extra inning games. You got a runner stand at second base, and the next guy up strikes out. Okay, so if that's what it. So they all talk about, you got a better chance of scoring with 3 chances to swing the bat. Now, what are your chances? You're back down to 1 again. So, and again, and I'm not saying because I don't think strikeouts are a bad thing, because obviously the pitching is good throughout the big leagues, so you're going to strike out. But, it goes back to the same thing. Hey, look, once in a while, a 2-out single wins games. We win a lot. You can win a lot of games with 2-out singles. It doesn't have to be an extra base hit. So, and I've always said, the tougher you are on the other team, the more that they have to be ready to catch the ball, the harder it is on them. And I watch a lot of games, and I see a lot of balls being thrown, and guys are striking out pitches. And, one of the things I see today, Laura, Howie, the fastballs that are taken in the strike zone.
Well, particularly with the Mets.
What's the percentage today? You look at the percentage of pitches thrown today. Okay, let's just say 70% of them are off speed pitches. Years ago, guys didn't want to hit an off-speed pitch. That's why they threw them. They were taught to hit fastballs. And we're taking fastballs that are hittable right now because, again, we're not catching up because the numbers in our head is there's, the majority of the time I'm going to get an off-speed pitch, so I got to be ready to hit it. And you're getting beat by fastballs. And you go back to what Marcus Semien just said. Hey, I got to start catching up to fastballs. And what's happened? He's come alive. He's starting to swing the bat better because he's hitting fastballs.
And you know what? And Laura been on this all year too. And that's something Carlos Mendoza's talked about for a long time now. The amount, and there are numbers that support this, the number of fastballs in the strike zone the Mets have taken, and then they distill it even further down to key spots, runners on base, runners in scoring position. It's staggering how many fastballs they've taken in hitters' counts with men on base where they should be drooling over the prospect of hitting the fastball.
Right. And it kind of, I talked to Daniel Murphy about this too. It's like there seems to be, I don't want to like paint things with a broad brush, but there seems to be a decline of like the instinctual hitter, of a guy who's like, see the ball, hit the ball, which is like just like the very baseline of baseball. And there's almost an overthinking factor that's overtaken a few of these players throughout the league. We're seeing it in real time in these at bats.
Yeah, I can't argue with that, Laura. And I'll tell you, nobody studied hitting more than Dan Murphy did. And so, he was told one time, hey, look, I see I see ball, hit ball. When he said, I'm going to start hitting the ball in the air, he became one of the most dangerous hitters in the league. So, I mean, that theory plays. Make no mistake about it. It plays.
Yeah, I love listening to Murphy, especially on this road trip with Gary. I mean, he's so. And Terry, from day one when you said when he first signed, he'd sit on the bench with you and just talk baseball. And he's so smart and he's so great to listen to because he understands the game, and I'm enjoying him thoroughly in this role that he has right now on television, and I certainly hope the Mets utilize him more and more. I want to get to Juan Soto for a bit because obviously he's on a great stretch right now and probably one of the best of his career to this point. He's locked in, he's having fun and gelling with the team, especially with his young outfield partners. They really have seemed to form this little alliance, and it's very refreshing to see. And Howie, as you pointed out, at least we got these kids this season, if nothing else. But the fact that Soto was gelled so well with them and there's this camaraderie, I want to get your opinion on that Soto stepping up a little bit more, having more fun, and relating to these kids, and what you've seen with Juan Soto in comparison to last year, and how he has this positive influence on these youngsters that are being brought into the major leagues?
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to answer that question, John, because for one thing, I think of Juan Soto, what is he, 28? 27,
Yep.
and he's the old man in the outfield there. And I think he's actually, in a sense, I think he's really relishing the opportunity, if not necessarily to be a mentor, because he said he doesn't want that or he doesn't consider himself that. But I think it further energizes him to see those two kids running around and making the plays they do defensively. And Laura can probably expand on this a lot more than I am, because I don't travel that much, or this year, not at all. He seems to be a completely different person, more comfortable this year, less sullen than he appeared to be at times last year. Again, that's more of an observation than it is a one-on-one interaction history on my part. But, I look at him now and very cynically, I wonder if any of that has to do with the fact that with Lindor down for as long as he's been, Juan is the unquestioned centerpiece of this club for this period during which Lindor has been unable to play. And, again, you looked at Soto and you wouldn't have envisioned him as being a vocal, demonstrative type leader. But I think that he has morphed into that role almost serendipitously this year, because of the fact that perhaps Lindor hasn't been around as a player anyway, and that he is infinitely, in my opinion, and Laura, I'm really anxious to hear your take on this, more comfortable and feels more at home, even just listening to the way he answers questions now than he did a year ago. So much less withdrawn, and I use the word sullen. This year, he's, to me anyway, completely different person.
I mean, I think you definitely saw there were moments last year, because Soto, I also covered him when he was on the Yankees. He has a very sort of impish personality. He's a little bit sarcastic. He is a little fun, but he is understated. And I think you're seeing more of that come to the fore. I was talking to AJ Ewing about it the other day, and I brought up the mentor thing, and he was like, well, no, he doesn't view himself as a mentor, but I do feel mentored by him. And it's mostly because Soto is very much the, lead by doing rather than speaking. And I think that you're seeing that. I think what Soto does imbue this team with, for lack of a better term, is that he doesn't have a loser's mentality. Even when things are going poorly, he's like, we're going to figure this out one way or another, because of course we will. I'm Juan Soto. It's one of those things. And you are seeing him have fun. You are seeing him embrace kind of like this sort of brotherhood in the outfield. And he very much wants to be, he's like, oh, these are my teammates. He specifically said, these are my equals, even though these are just kids starting out. And one of the interesting things that he had said earlier in the season is that, sometimes he thinks back to 2019 when he was the kid on the Nationals and things weren't going well, and the way that the veterans around him picked him up. So sometimes I haven't had a chance to talk to him about it, because, sometimes he gets crowded by people when he is available to speak. But, how much of that is him thinking of where he was in 2019, with all this expectation, all this pressure on him on a Nationals team that for a good portion of the season was not very good. And he was able to kind of continue developing with the help of the veterans on that team, and then eventually stepping up when that team went through a million injuries and win a World Series. So it could be there are some parallels there when he looks at guys like AJ Ewing and Carson Bench, who are also coming into a team that is struggling and have all this expectation on them and are just having fun and going out there and playing the game, frankly, the right way.
Yeah, he's certainly looking like he's having fun, and we're enjoying watching this camaraderie between all of them. And Soto, the team outside of Juan still does not have the presence in the lineup of a feared slugger. Obviously that missing piece that used to be our first baseman is no longer in the lineup. So we only have this one feared slugger in this lineup right now. And it could be too early to discuss this. It could be premature. But do you think with the Mets record and the calendar now in June that they might seek another piece to plug into that lineup that could be a little bit of a bigger bopper? Or is it just wait and see until they decide if they're going to be buyers or sellers at this point?
Well, for me, I think they've got to wait a little bit and see what the cavalry can present, because they have Alvarez coming back sooner than expected. Unless there's a setback, he might be back with a big club by the time they're back home. On this after this road trip, who knows? Because he's going out on a rehab now, and again, Polanco should be back as soon as this weekend, and nobody's going to paint either or both of them as saviors. But at least they need the opportunity to look at how this lineup presents itself with both of them playing virtually every day, and then have a better idea of what they need. But if they don't pick up some ground, some significant ground in the short term, then it's hard for me to imagine, John, that they would step out and make a real big acquisition that they think can put them over the top if they're not close enough to the top of the wild card race.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I'm 100% with Howie on this one. You have to wait a little bit longer, because at this point, going into yesterday, they were 5.5 games out of the wild card. I know it's way too early to look at the standings, but you want to be at least in shooting distance before you start kind of trying to add pieces here. It's hard.
I did a little math on this before the game, and I didn't do it off the top of my head. I'm no Sheldon Cooper, but I just figure that, okay, last year it only took 83 wins to get the last wild card spot. Generally speaking, it's going to take 85, 86. So in my head, I said, all right, let's say it's going to take 84, since there are no gangbusters ahead of them. Let's say it's going to take 84 to get to the final wild card this year. Well, right now, as we speak, they're 9 games under 500, which means that they've got to be 9 games over 500 just to get to the break-even point, which puts you in the conversation. So with 101 games to go, that means that basically they've got to go 15 games over 500 the rest of the way to get to 84 wins. Those are just raw numbers if you want to get to 84. Can this team, as currently constituted, even when they get those 2 players back in the short term, play 15 games over 500 the rest of the way? Based on what we've seen, that's a pretty tall order. But it's too early for anybody to say that it's out of the question now, in my opinion.
Well, I think both of you are exactly right, but I will tell you this. I don't know Steve Cohen real well, but I know him well enough to know he is a huge fan and a huge believer. So anything for me could happen. Anything. He said, we're going to go do something, go get it done. I can see it happening. I just know how he is, and he bleeds orange and blue. And if there's a part of him that said, we got to go get a piece, and we'll see what happens, and I'll bite the bullet for the rest of the year, then he'll do it. I really believe that. Hell, Howie, right now you can't prepare for next year because you don't know what's going to if there's going to be a next year. So right. You better worry about right now what's facing you today. And so and I know Steve well enough that I wouldn't be shocked to see something happen.
Well, still got 6 weeks, right, till the deadline?
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. And I agree with what you said. I looked at it the other day, and I'm thinking, you know what, if they can creep at the All-Star break, if they can, of course, if they got to 500, that'd be great. But if they got, 1 or 2 games below 500, I think, because now you're talking about you got your big boys are back in the lineup. We'll see how they're going to function. But in the meantime, if you went out and got yourself and I don't know where you're going to get them this time of year, obviously. But, I wouldn't be shocked to see something happen.
I hope so. It's more fun that way.
Yeah.
Oh, God, yes. And you know what? I'm not there, guys, like you are. But I have a lot of friends in New York, and they are huge fans, and they go to a lot of games, and they're bringing back some bad vibes. I'm hearing bad vibes about the fan base, about the energy at the ballpark. And you know what? All of a sudden, you can change that this fast. And I go back to what happened in 2015, guys. I'm just telling you, I lived it. And the energy changed with a couple of pieces here and a couple of pieces there, and things are different. So
I'll tell you
I think anything could happen, and I wouldn't put it past them to do something.
One quick note about the fan base. A couple of homestands ago, when they were really struggling, they were coming really just out of the depths of that 12-game losing streak and started to get a little bit better and then kicked backwards again. Anyway, the Tigers come in and the Mets win 3 in a row from the Tigers. Just before that series, when fans would cross in front of our booth, and Laura and John know how close the fans are to our radio booth, sometimes I feel like I better put some Danish or something out there because they keep coming by. I want to be a nice host, but they come by and go, Howie, we're brutal. Howie, we're brutal. Now they sweep 3 games from the Tigers. So help me. After that last game, a couple of people walked by the booth. Howie, we're back. So it doesn't take much, as you just pointed out.
I totally agree.
Yeah, it's a roller coaster. This season has been such a roller coaster because they're great one week, and then the next week they're losing 4 in a row, and then they come back and they win 3 or 4 in a row, and it's an emotional roller coaster that's driving me crazy. I mean, last night, and I'll end with this. Last night, I mean, I tapped out for the first time all season when Vientos hit into that double play. I think it was in the 6th inning, and I was like, "That's it." But they'll win tonight, and I'll be like, "Here we go." We could get on a roll, and that's what this team has done to me for 60 years. So I'm used to it. I hope for the best. I expect the worst. But I enjoy discussing it. This is an honor for me to even have all of you here, and I'm able to do this every week to it's almost like a psychotherapy session for myself. So I'm enjoying it immensely, and I appreciate Laura and Howie for coming on the leadoff today. And Laura, I know you're out there on the West Coast, and
good morning.
Yeah,
good morning.
But please let everybody know where they can read your fabulous work in Newsday, and of course you're in the booth with Howie on the home games in the 4th inning.
Now and then when she's in town.
I mean, I will say I cover every single road game, so once in a while I do have someone fill in at home. I know, play the tiny violin. You can read me at newsday.com/Mets. You can catch me on X at Albanese Laura, and I have a podcast, first-time listener, long-time caller on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
Buck Shore must be listening to the podcast. I just got a call from him. So
say hi.
I love the Buck phone calls.
Yeah,
I miss him.
Funny guy. Very good guy. All right, guys. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
Okay.
Have a good one.
Get those clubs ready, Howie. Get those clubs out and get them ready.
Yeah, they're real dangerous, let me tell you. My weapons.
Really, really good leadoff segment today with Howie and Laura and TC talking about what's going on with the Mets and hearing all of their insights on what's going on with the team. They've taken us on a roller coaster all season long, and we just hope for the best. What can we do? We're here watching the games, listening to Howie, watching him on TV, and we just hope that they're able somehow to make this a more competitive season. And the roller coaster ride that we've all been on as Met fans has been pretty intense this year. We want to bring you up to date on our presenting sponsor, the Tunnel to Towers Foundation. They continue their amazing work each and every day, and their mission just never stops. It's one of the most dramatic and moving races you'll find anywhere. Registration is now open for the Tunnel to Towers Foundation's 5K and walk in New York. This event retraces the heroic footsteps of New York City firefighter Stephen Siller. On 9/11, Stephen ran through the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel to the Twin Towers, where he lost his life saving others. The foundation was created in his memory, and that's where the name Tunnel to Towers came from. This year's run will take place on Sunday, September 27th. You can sign up by going to t2t.org. Tunnel to Towers has completed more than a dozen stops on its Steel Across America tour. The foundation is bringing a steel beam recovered at Ground Zero from New York to California and back. This is giving Americans a chance to see and touch a piece of history. At an earlier stop before the Mets-Marlins game in Miami, T2T awarded a mortgage-free smart home to Marine Lance Corporal Thomas Parker. For more information on the Steel Tour and to find out if it's coming to your city, just go to t2t.org. And in honor of Memorial Day, Tunnel to Towers paid off the mortgages for 25 Gold Star and fallen first responder families. This is part of the foundation's commitment to provide 343 mortgage-free homes to mark the 25th anniversary of 9/11. The number is significant because there were 343 FDNY members killed on that fateful day. The mortgage payoffs took place in 13 different states, and you could help the mission to do good by donating just $11 a month at t2t.org. That's T, the number 2T.org. We will be back with a special recollection of the most famous argument ever that Terry Collins had with umpire Tom Hallion that led to the phrases, "You got to give us a shot," and "ass in the jackpot," that everybody remembers 10 years later. Hear what SNY's Gary Apple and Steve Gelbs remember about that night right after this word from A.J. Minter on behalf of the Tunnel to Towers Foundation.
I'm Mets pitcher A.J. Minter. I come from a military family, and that's why I support the mission for Tunnel to Towers. They help our military, our veterans, and our first responders. They change lives. I support Tunnel to Towers because it truly embodies what America stands for. You can do your part to help as well. A donation of $11 a month can make a big difference. Go to t2t.org to find out more. Let's go Mets, and let's help Tunnel to Towers.
Well, what I remember about that day is that I was in the Hamptons with my wife because it was a national game.
Name dropping.
And
yes. Hamptons.
Yeah, I was in the Hamptons with my wife. Saw the ejection happen, and I'm pretty sure that I chatted with Noah Syndergaard that night after it took place. But it didn't come out until
right
a
away.
year later, maybe.
Yeah, took a while.
And I'm sure it's not totally unique in the game. It's just unique that we actually got to have access to it. We were privy to it.
It was phenomenal. I mean, come on, that is one of the best ejections I think we've ever seen. But I think that the thing that I love most about it, we've seen Lou Piniella over the years kick dirt on home plate, and we go back to some of the older managers that you mentioned, like an Earl Weaver. But I think that the one thing that jumps out, he was protecting his player. And that's what you want from your manager. You want a manager who has your back. And man, he had his back on that night in a big situation. And I think you gain the respect of your players, and it has long-lasting consequences. For pure entertainment value, it was as good as it gets. But the underlying value of it, I think, goes beyond that when it comes to that moment.
Steve Gelbs and Gary Apple remembering what happened 10 years ago when everybody's ass was in the jackpot. And now it's time for another never forget story, remembering the 25th anniversary of 9/11 and those in the New York baseball community who will indeed never forget that tragedy. Here is Mets Hall of Famer Lee Mazzilli and his story about his interaction with a friend who was a firefighter on that day. And directly after that, T2T opened up a new Veterans Village in Atlanta. So let's take a look at both of those pieces right now.
Very good friend of mine was a fireman. He was off that night, that day. And obviously, everyone was called in. So we were at our house, and he was telling me the story. And I said to him, you knew where you were going. You knew what was happening. I said, let me ask you a question. At any one time, like, you knew you were going and may not come out. And he goes, yeah. And he goes, hey, did you ever think about telling your lieutenant, I don't know. I don't know if I want to go in. Like, have you ever said that because you knew what was going on and seeing it? And he says, no, not at all. And I said, why not? And he looked me straight in the eye. straight in the eye and said, "It's our job." I went, "What?" He says, "It's our job." And it just took me back. Here's my buddy, knowing that he's going to go in and probably die. A good chance of that happening to protect us. And when he said to me, "It's our job," I went, wow, this is a special, special person.
I want to speak to you all about a promise that the Tunnel to Towers Foundation made back in late 2022. A promise to eradicate homelessness amongst the 50,000 veterans who are struggling nationwide.
When Frank first started to float this idea of eradicating homelessness of our veterans, of course you take it seriously.
To see these veterans taken off the street and to be given a dignified place to live and all the resources they need was incredible.
St. Francis of Assisi says, we start by doing what's necessary. Then we do what's possible. And suddenly, we're sitting here in our second veteran village. Nothing is impossible.
What a beautiful day to celebrate a great milestone for Atlanta and the Tunnel to Towers Foundation, a beacon of hope for so many in need.
Actually, we were very nervous on taking it on. When you take somebody off the street, it's a lot more than that. They need all the help. The big question for us, can we do that? And we said, yes, we have to. You know why? Because it's unacceptable to leave one homeless veteran on the street.
This was a hotel. We saw the possibilities of having a wonderful place of renovation for our heroes. Tunnel to Towers is providing a model for the nation. We want to deal one-on-one with our heroes.
Having a safe space that reinstills that dignity, honor, and respect is paramount for that care, and that's what we're providing here.
We must provide the services on site or have the ability to get them the services they need, and Tunnel to Towers checks all those boxes.
It's a way to help them assimilate back into society to have a thriving life, and that's the goal.
When we made a promise to America that we're going to eradicate homelessness amongst our veterans, we could only do it by the generosity of so many people that are watching this today.
It's the perfect public-private partnership where the public can step up and donate land. We can then go and build a village.
Go to t2t.org and donate $11 a month.
You could stream the entire documentary, Never Forget How Baseball Helped Heal New York, anytime on demand on the Terry Collins Show YouTube channel. So go to youtube.com/The Terry Collins Show to see that wonderful documentary. We want to tell you about our friends at Coach's Collectibles, your source for guaranteed 100% authentic pieces of Mets history. And this week, some great special items are now available. To celebrate the induction of Bobby Valentine into the Mets Hall of Fame, Coach's Collectibles NewYork.com has a great signed photo of Bobby from the night he disguised himself with that mustache and sunglasses following his ejection from the game that night. It's inscribed Mustache Game with the date of June 9th, 1999. It's authenticated and just $45 each. Also available this week, honoring the 10th anniversary of the Ass in the Jackpot argument between Terry Collins and umpire Tom Hallion, dual-signed baseballs, photos, and the actual ticket to that game from May 28th, 2026. The tickets are slabbed and authenticated by PSA. Coming up for you Long Island fans, the very first ever public signing with Mets pitcher Christian Scott on Monday, June the 8th at 6:30 p.m. at Mulcahy's in Wantagh. Photo ops and autographs are available with the Mets rookie pitcher. That's June the 8th at Mulcahy's on Long Island. And finally, on June the 1st, back in 2012, Johan Santana pitched the only solo Mets no-hitter in history. That was the first time a Met had accomplished that tremendous goal. If you remember that night and you'd like a piece of that history, you could go to CoachesCollectiblesNewYork.com and pick up an authenticated signed ticket from that game. There are autographed baseballs and jerseys as well from that historic night from June the 1st, 2012, when Johan Santana made history for the New York Mets by throwing their first no-hitter. And use the promo code TCSHOW for free shipping. 10% of all sales go to the Tunnel to Towers Foundation. Go to Coaches Collectibles New York for more information, and be sure to follow them on Instagram and Facebook as well. Well, we want to tell you about next week's show before we wrap it up. Next week, Terry will be joined by the one and only Curtis Granderson, and TC and the Grandy Man will get together again to discuss baseball, including the Mets, the CBA negotiations, potential lockout, and so much more. That's going to be right here next week on the Terry Collins Show. And you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and X. Listen to our podcast on all the platforms out there, and please like and subscribe to them as well. And don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Every full episode since the debut of this show in 2024 is there. We will release highlights from the show each and every week, so you could go there and see so much content. Subscribe now by going to youtube.com/The Terry Collins Show. And that will wrap up this edition of the program. Thanks to our creative director, Marsh, and our researcher, Dominic DiBiase. For Terry Collins, this is John Arezzi. Thanks for joining us, and have a great week, everyone.